Greetings, my name is Michael Ruskin and I have a message for the Pharisee politicians of New Zealand. We've been told we're on a team of 5 million and that we're to be kind to one another and together we're going to fight the COVID-19 virus. Well, I'm all for that. I'm all for fighting the virus and doing what's necessary, what's required. But I'm on no government team. I'm not on any parliamentary team, and you shouldn't be either, because character matters. When you were a kid, were you ever in a sports event where players were picked and you would hope that you got picked by the team with the best players, because obviously you wanted to win? But you know, the character of those selecting you was also important, because you wanted to know that your captain, your other players, would have the ability to persevere when things got difficult. They wouldn't take the easy route or give up. While this country was preparing itself for the pandemic response, how we would respond, our government, our parliament, passed what's been described as the most extreme abortion legislation in the world. So, government is two-faced. They care for the old. They say we must social distance. We must be careful to protect them. But the unborn, they don't give them a thought. Wash your hands and wash your heart. The Apostle Matthew, he records an instance where Jesus had a confrontation with the scribes and the Pharisees. And they were religious groups of his time. And the Pharisees in particular had the responsibility of interpreting the law of Moses and helping people to know how to make their way forward, how to understand life. But they often interpreted it according to their own ideas, not according to Moses. We have a new idea, new ideologies in our society. It's not according to Christian principles. It's according to secular ideas. And they are at war with what we've traditionally thought is important. We're to harden our hearts. We're not to care for those in need, those most vulnerable, those without a voice. 8 times Matthew records Jesus saying to the Pharisees in particular, "Woe to you, hypocrites." When he said woe to them, he meant you're doing something which is going to bring judgment upon you. And our Pharisaical politicians have done the same thing. You shouldn't have any part to do with what they have done. When we read about woe coming upon people, we think of something that happened to them that wasn't of their making, like a volcano or a flood or something, and they have to persevere. They've got difficulties to surmount. But what Jesus said to the Pharisees was, you are bringing this upon yourself. This is woe to you. And our government, our parliament, is under a similar sort of judgment. 8 times the Lord called them hypocrites. And what else can we conclude about our parliament? On the one hand, it says we should be caring about elderly people in particular who may die, and that's sad. They may have the COVID virus. Whether they killed them or not, we might not know. But they want us to be sympathetic, as we should be, in that situation. But they don't want any sympathy, any emotion, no tear for the unborn that they passed this draconian legislation just recently. I'm going to just touch on the 8 woes that the Lord gave to the Pharisees, and also how it applies to our political Pharisees, and a comment on the legislation they just passed. the Lord said, "Woe to you Pharisees, because you shut up the kingdom of heaven." The Pharisees wouldn't let other people come to know the love and grace of God, and they wouldn't go in themselves, and they kept others out. Our parliament has shut out life from the unborn. They could have lived meaningful lives, but they shut human life, the experiences of life, out from them. The abortion law now available will be on demand. Abortion will be on demand without any reason up to birth, for any reason up to birth. Secondly, woe to you Pharisees and scribes, because you make a pretense of long prayer. How often have we seen politicians grandstanding? They make a pretense. They talk about people dying from the COVID, with the COVID virus, with a sad face. Where are their tears to the unborn? That doesn't rate a second thought. Sex-selective abortion will now be legalised. Of course, government says they're not approving sex selection abortion, but if we go by the experience in the United Kingdom, it will happen here. And they're going to review it in 5 years. How thoughtful. The UK experience has shown that the disparity between the number of boys and girls being born will increase, and that more boys will be born than girls. And some immigrant communities prefer to have boys than girls. And we need the vote, don't we? So let's give them what they want. Thirdly, the Pharisees have followers who are conformist in their thinking. Jesus Christ said to them that they would cross seas and rivers to make one convert, and they would make that convert as wicked as themselves. Well, strange to say, but there's groupthink in our parliament. There's globalist thinking. Whatever happens, usually overseas, our government, our politicians can't wait to fall into line. They are, to put it mildly, good globalists. Groupthink and narrative are what matter to them. The current 20-week limit for disability selective abortion will be scrapped, and abortion will be available up to birth for disabilities, including Down syndrome. Well, talk about discrimination. Talk about not being suitable for the brave new world being built. There it is. If you're a Down syndrome child, you aren't good enough for us. They are grounds for you to get aborted. Fourthly, you are blind guides and fools. You say, whoever swears by the temple doesn't matter, but whoever swears by the gold in the temple, that's more important. Money is what matters. They have corrupted values, and our politicians have corrupted values. They believe we are the result of a random evolutionary process. We don't have any real value because everything was accidental, random. But traditionally our society, Western civilization, has carried the idea we are made in the image of God, and every one of us has value and worth. Particularly the unborn. They are full of potential and possibilities. But our pharisaical politicians, they don't think so. Their values are different than our traditional values. There will be no requirement that a doctor must be involved with providing an abortion. They are legalistic hypocrites. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, for you pay tithe on mint, but you have omitted the weightier matters of the law, mercy and faith. What matters to our political caste are sound bites. What matters to them are first reading, second reading, third reading, royal assent. How nice. Legalistic niceties to hide the immorality of what they are doing. There will be no legal requirement that babies born after a failed abortion are given medical support. They'll just be left there to die. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, for you make clean the outside of the cup, but within are full of extortion. Extortion, of course, is demanding something of someone, to get something off them illegally, to steal something from someone. Our Pharisaical politicians have stolen life from the unborn. They've weighed up their ideology, they've weighed up the value of the vote, and they said, you know what? The voiceless, we don't hear them. There will be no legal requirement that pain relief be given to babies being aborted between 20 weeks and birth. You know, if a baby is born, why doesn't the government allow a women's group or some other group to go and take that baby? If it's survived the attempt of the state to kill it, give it a chance for life. There'll be many people would want to rescue that baby. We have people who will rescue dolphins and whales, and that gets on TV. What about allowing those who are willing to rescue those babies who have survived an attempt to murder them? 7. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, for you are like whited sepulchres. You are beautiful on the outside, but within are full of dead men's bodies. A sepulchre is just a tomb, isn't it? There's nothing in it, just death. Our politicians, our Pharisees have brought death. There's nothing good, there's no life in what they've just done. You know, it can be profitable to go to a cemetery, to walk through it and look on the tombstones, how people died, how long they lived. With the legislation that was just passed, there'll be no tombstone for the unborn. They'll just go out with the hospital waste material, won't they? There'll be no marker for how they died. But I put it to you, people of goodwill will remember them. And Jesus one day said to the people of his time that it'll be easier for the people of Sodom and Gomorrah in the afterlife than for you, because you have rejected me. Our politicians have rejected the word of Christ, and they've decided that the unborn have no value. They are no use to them. And finally, 8, the Lord says they have the Pharisees and scribes of his day have a murdering spirit. You build the tombs of the prophets and adorn the monuments of the righteous and say, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we wouldn't have killed the prophets. No, we would have taken care of them. And the Lord said, you are a hypocrite. You wouldn't have listened to the prophets. The Pharisees of the Lord's day claim to be better than the people in the past. And our politicians claim to be better than the people in the past. But they're not. National MP Simon O'Connor, to his credit, got down to the truth of the matter when he spoke about New Zealand being told after the recent terrorist attack in Christchurch that they are us and we are them. I've said many, many times before that human rights apply to all humans. And then he commented, they are us and we are them, but when it comes to the unborn child, according to those who support this bill, the recently passed abortion amendments, unborn children are certainly not with us and we are not with them. The New Zealand Pharisee politicians have the same murdering spirit as the Pharisees of old. There's no escaping from it. As in the past, so today. Each generation, each of us, each individual chooses life or death. You choose ideas that guide your life, and you reject others. It's pretty obvious what our Parliament has chosen. And I'm encouraging any of you who don't agree with that to step outside of it. Don't follow them. Do what you can, be salt. And try and have a word of decency and goodness. Let me conclude with this. There was once a time when the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery to Jesus, and they wanted him to approve the stoning of her being put to death. And after considering the matter, he said to them, any of you who haven't committed a sin, you cast the first stone. And as we know, they all went away one by one. I'm not condemning, and I wouldn't dream of judging anyone who's had an abortion. That's not my responsibility. I would never do that. And Jesus doesn't do it either. But we will judge, he will judge those who make it possible. And we live in a democracy, and we're allowed to have our opinion. And we're allowed to say what we feel and give reasons for it. Jesus came to save the world, not to condemn it. Now is a time of grace, of receiving his love. But if we can't do that, then we need to be prepared for facing the consequences. Jesus said to the Pharisees of his day, you serpents, you generation of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell? We don't like to hear about hell today, but my understanding in it, the Orthodox understanding, that it is separation from the love of God. The word serpent is a very interesting one the Lord used to describe the Pharisees, because a serpent poisons its victim. It paralyzes them. And so many today are poisoned and paralyzed by the political Pharisees and their ideologies. And they've hardened the hearts of people towards the unborn, while going overboard about those who may be suffering from the virus. I want to encourage you to distance yourself from them. As in the days of Noah, as in the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, the Lord said will be these days, the last days. You need to decide how you're going to live, how you're going to spend this time, how you're going to spend eternity. The prophet Hosea said, come, let us return to the Lord. He has torn, but he will heal. He has wounded us, but he will bandage us. Our nation's in a mess. We've abandoned God. We've taken what's good and cast it out and trampled it. I'm encouraging you again, don't follow, don't listen to the Pharisees in Parliament. James says, draw near to God and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands. Don't just wash them to prevent a virus. Cleanse your heart. Come to the Lord. Return to him, you sinners, and purify your hearts. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.